A tough decision had to be made. Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. Today's kind of one of those bittersweet episodes. I'm really happy to add another one of these to my collection, but the circumstances that this original family member had to sell this guitar for is a little bit sad. But here we have another Gibson Spotlight special. If you happen to have missed my other episodes on these, it's my favorite all-time Les Paul model, especially out of the 80s. They were birthed using tops that were just a little bit too short for the Heritage Series guitars, and they used up the Paul walnut body strips to fill up the dead space. They were primarily made in 1983, however a few 84 and 85 examples have surfaced. But they've kind of become collector's items, and were offered in two different finishes, Antique Natural and Antique Sunburst. This is one of the ASBs. They're a little bit less fancy. They get a regular headstock rather than the natural colored one. And I've got to say, this is a chunky example. It reminds me of number 188 in my collection. But you're going to notice somebody actually installed a pickguard on this one at some point in time. I do believe some left the factory like that, but most of them they just had it in the case and then the owner could decide if they wanted to or not. All things considered, I would actually say this one's looking pretty clean. But brief history aside, let's go ahead and learn the story of 83014. A few weeks ago, I received an email from a new viewer of the show. He was looking for information on his Spotlight guitar because he needed to sell it for an upcoming medical expense. He was located in Texas. He called around at a few other shops to see if he could consign it or if they'd be interested in appraising it. And surprisingly, he couldn't find a shop to help him. So it's at that point in time where he ran across all the videos that I've made of these Spotlights and decided to reach out. I told him, yeah, I offer appraisals, or I'd be willing to pay you this much to add it to my Spotlight collection. To which he was relieved he finally found somebody that knows about these things. I sent him that 3-pack of the StewMac shipping kit, coached him a bit on how to pack it up, and yeah, now here we are. But this guitar was purchased by his father sometime in the early 80s, so that makes sense. It was made in 1983, so that lines up with him probably being the original owner, because he was told by the shop that it was a special build piece and really unique. So he didn't hesitate at all, and he quickly bought it along with its case, and reportedly played it a handful of times, but decided that it was just too nice and needed to be preserved. He could buy a different guitar to beat it up. So it's remained in its case ever since then. However, about a decade later, in the mid-90s, he always saw this guitar and its case peeking out from his father's bedroom closet as a kid, and one day he asked him about it. So it's kind of like a nice father-son moment. They took it out, they were both in awe of its beauty, but he asked him not to touch it, telling him that it was priceless and really special, and one day it would be his. But then as he continues to grow up, as a reward for graduating high school, his dad said that is the time he would get to have the guitar. So the son kept his promise and got the guitar in the early 2000s. And it's at that time that they cleaned it up for the last time, and he said protect it from here on out. And so it moved from his hometown of Beaumont, Texas down to Houston, has survived numerous hurricanes, financial pickles, and generally hard times, in the seller's words. And his whole life he only would ever just briefly open up the case to take a look at it, to admire it as his father did. So priceless heirloom guitar that was handed down by his father. What actually caused this sale was actually a family member had some medical expenses. That family member being his cat. Now, I know some of you might go, hey, it's just a cat, but to some people, animals are just as much of the part of their family as their brother or sister. So she was diagnosed with stage 2 feline lymphoma, and the proceeds of selling this guitar makes it so he can afford the radiation costs, as well as chemotherapy. So Alex, I wish you and your cat all the best of luck. I hope you enjoy being able to peek this video from time to time if you ever want to see your guitar again. But with respect, I'll keep this guitar in great shape for you. I've actually just been informed there is a GoFundMe page if you feel like chipping in a couple of bucks to help his treatments. I am not a part of this whatsoever. I wasn't even asked to share the link, but I figured I would supply it just in case. So as far as Spotlights go, I already told you, it's a lot heavier than most of them. Maybe it doesn't have the most insane quilting or figuring, but it definitely has a lot of movement to it in person. But the gold hardware is in exceptional condition for one of these. You got a little bit of tarnishing to our bridge. As far as the case, this definitely looks like closet condition. This is really clean for one of these. It's still got your Gibson badge. It's not all scratched up. It's the brown interior of the Gen 3 chainsaw. Not one of the versions with the lid ribbon, unfortunately, but the hinges still keep it propped up nicely. But now let's see, do we have any case candy? We do. We have a case key in here, but that's not actually for this case. It's for the Lifton reissue style of the 80s. So that tells me the original shop might have played Swaparoo, or in the story when he said he got a case for it, he bought the chainsaw protector and sold the more flimsy looking one. But here's a very minty fresh owner's manual. You don't see those too often. That's a nice shape. Then we have an interesting note from Gibson. Now this appears to be like a marketing pamphlet just on Gibson's letterhead, but I mean that looks like it was typewritten out. Doesn't pertain to a spotlight in any way possible, but it's still kind of cool to have. But to learn more about this low serial number spotlight, let's go ahead and throw it on the workbench to take an individual look at its parts and specs. Well, that was certainly a labor of love, but look how much this top just came to life. It's no longer hiding underneath the gunk and dirt. I can see why there was a sign-off in our control cavity on this one now. So, taking the pickguard off, I found out it was definitely installed outside of the factory. How do I know? They had the screws backwards. They put the big long one on the top and the small one in the bottom. Now whether his father did the installation or if the store did it before he ever even saw it, I don't think we'll know. But I did notice something else that they did back here. They wanted to protect the guitar from scratches, so they put these pool table felt pads on the back. And while well-intentioned, nitro finishes are weird. So instead of scratches, now you have an imprint of the felt pad. And instead of a ding from your screw, you have another semi-felt pad impression there. Just one of those situations where you can't win, you have to live with one or the other. And it's interesting because modern day Gibsons do that, and I've seen some people complain on forums about it. But let's go ahead and check out our pickups. The gold is in immaculate condition on this, just some light scratches. This was pretty shocking to see, a January of 1982 Tim Shaw PAF. And the condition of our bridge pickup looks about the same. This one's also a January of 1982 Tim Shaw. Doesn't look like anybody's ever messed with our pickup covers or anything like that. Our bridge still has a nice strong reading of 7.4 K ohms. Neck position 7.29, and the middle, just for fun, 367. But now for our neck pickup cavity, it's marked A, and you can also see the ASB stamp standing for Antique Sunburst. It looks like some other various sign off. And here's a good cross section of your walnut center stripe with your maple top joining onto your mahogany body. And our bridge pickup cavity has more of the same, although with a little bit more raw wood showing. Our bridge is an era correct one, Nashville in style, made in Germany by Schaller. Unfortunately, over the years it has slightly collapsed. So if you wanted the best intonation out of this, you should probably replace it. Outside of a little pitting over here, it's in phenomenal shape. And the tailpiece is also original, full gold. And thankfully, they didn't play with the knobs. It's my favorite version of a Gibson bonnet knob. They just have that really cool honey molasses color mixing together with a little bit of gold sparkle and your thumb bleeders. But here's one last look at it before we have to install the pickguard back on. But moving on from that walnut maple top and mahogany body, we've got the mahogany neck, and take a look at our frets. I took the time to give these the deluxe polish job, so this thing really is looking brand new. But that is a straight up rosewood fretboard. You've got your acrylic inlays. Pretty par for the course here, but it conditioned very nicely and darkened up. I don't see any noticeable fret wear, so the story seems to match up. I measure 1.69 inches at the nut, 2.06 at the 12th, 0.84 first fret neck depth, and 0.98 by the 12th. Here's that neck profile at the first fret and the 12th fret. Honestly, it looks almost more like a U shape. It definitely gets a little bit wider up here. The shoulders really just scoop away. It's definitely C shape on the 60s to medium neck profile territory. Definitely not huge. The headstock was one of the few areas where I actually found real wear and tear. And it's just from the age of the tuners putting pressure down. You can see where the lacquer's kind of chipped up right there. Now I have heard you can put like super glue underneath it and it'll secure it back down. Your other option is just to lightly poke it and then it'll flake off, because the only reason you're even seeing that is it's because it's the clear coat. And the clear coat yellows with age, but once that chips off, then you just see the black underneath it. I was extra careful while polishing those areas. But our Gibson logo is looking pretty good, but our truss rod cover is completely blank, as all these are from the factory. Well, now she's all strung back up, let's go ahead and flip over to the backside. I was looking really hard to see if there were any buckle marks or little button indents, but this is one of the cleaner spotlights I've ran across. Now, due to the lacquer chipping around the headstock, it's not the cleanest I've ever seen. Number 36 gets that title. That was just a minty beast. But I definitely still give this like a pretty solid 9.8 out of 10. But I always get excited when I see this. So that's Floyd Leonard's initials right there. He marked it March of 1983. Now, usually if he puts like a, hey, this sounds good, or it has a really nice top, he'll have Star stars right beside it. But this one, he deviated and put the stars over here. This is an awesome control cavity. Nothing has ever been touched. I'm pretty confident I'm the first guy to even look at the originality of this one. But that pot code dates to 1982, the 50-something week. There we go, we can read it on this one, the 52nd week of 1982, so almost 83. And do you notice these dots over here? I find that quite often on ones that have never been touched. So watch for that next time you open a guitar. I've told you guys time and time again, it's not uncommon to find 2 matching 1980s and then either 2 matching 82s or 83s on these. And that's the case here, the 29th week of 1980 on both of these pots. And we can just barely see some other sign-offs underneath our control plate. And yes, we do still have the original shielding tin. The thin binding in the cutaway is kind of a bummer on this one because it has like some staining to the wood or something. So it just kind of becomes dark. Otherwise, this one's looking clean. Personally, I'm suspicious the strap buttons have been replaced because that one's like modernly gold. Whereas once we get down here, that's what I'm more so used to seeing as far as like the brassy look to it. And you can see there's some minor finished delamination around it. So that tells me it's possible something else was on this guitar or it's just kind of a aging / sloppy install job. Speaking of workmanship, I noticed something while cleaning this one. The last Spotlight we had reviewed, I mentioned it had like an overly exaggerated dish carve to it. This one, they went really crazy right here and like scooped it really deep, but then hardly did anything else for any of the other areas because this is pretty much flat in this area, but it just gets ridiculously deep right there. So yeah, it was a learning process of getting the deep dish carves to these. It's funny how they all just vary slightly, and you would never know it unless you got a crazy guy on the internet that documents all of them. But that's all right, I wear that title with pride. I love my Spotlights. And I love this style of tuner too, the double ring no line Clusons. Very tricky to replace if somebody has messed with them. But this is a really low serial number, number 14 from 1983. And after I purchased this, I thought, you know what? Don't I already have a 14 in my collection? Duplicate serial numbers are a thing, and typically you'll find an Antique Natural and an Antique Sunburst sharing it. But no, I went through my archives. I have consecutive serial numbers, 83015, but then I also have number 17, so if I can find 16, I've got 4 of them in a row. Consecutive serial numbers is always a fun thing to me. Separated at birth, brought back together. As far as condition up here, it looks like they might have dinged it against something at one point in time. It's a very minor ding though. And yeah, remember how I was telling you guys this one's really heavy? I was not exaggerating. It's nearly 11 pounds. 10 pounds, 11.8. Yep, that's pretty chunky for one of these. Let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how it sounds. So there we go, Spotlight Special number 14 documented on the show. I hope that doesn't come across as insensitive, playing Cat Scratch Fever and Stray Cat Strut. I mean, that's meant to be a tribute, giving the cat power to beat its sickness and to live many more years. And those are two awesome songs to play on such an awesome guitar. This is one that unfortunately just doesn't photograph that well, but now that it's all cleaned up, you can see the action, travel, and movement in this top. I just love how almost all the original owners have the same story. Had no idea that they were going into a store to buy a guitar, and they're just like, whoa, this thing caught my attention. It's like nothing we've ever seen before. These Spotlights are truly captivating, and I hope you enjoyed learning the story of number 14. If you're interested in being the next owner of this one, sorry, it's part of my collection. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you tomorrow on the next one. Take care.